So, Colin, just run me through, and very briefly, because I appreciate we could be here for hours, I'm sure, but just some of the previous productions, TV shows that you've worked on throughout your career.
Well, I've worked for about 20 years in documentaries.
Has it always been purely documentaries?
No, I created a series called SAS Who Dares Wins.
Love that.
Which is sort of like in lots of ways, the opposite of what we're talking about today. But so I've done things like that, which are almost like factual entertainment programs over there, and then made lots of documentary series which are crime focused. But we also make dramas as well. So I've made factual dramas too. So I cover the whole spectrum of factual program, but always factual. So always real stories, made with real people, trying to get at issues that feel like they're really topical and important.
I did mention in the intro that you are a BAFTA and Emmy-winning executive producer director. So where did you get those awards?
Thanks for bringing that up.
I thought, yeah, you can give me the £10. That's a joke, by the way.
So I've won a few BAFTAs over the years.
Oh, here we go.
Exactly. The first BAFTA that I won was for a series called Our War, which was told the story of soldiers in Afghanistan, but using UGC and found footage, and actually that ended up winning a BAFTA 2 years in a row. And then we made a series in America about capital punishment called Life and Death Row, which was about death penalty cases in America. And then won a BAFTA for a drama about a young boy called Damilola Taylor, who you may remember. He was a 11-year-old boy from Nigeria who was stabbed to death, and whose father became a crusader for kind of anti-knife crime crusader. And it was the story of his life and his father's campaign after his death. So yeah, I've been really lucky to win BAFTAs in both doc and drama. And then the Emmy, I'm sure you'll cut this out at this point, the Emmy was for a film called Space Dive, which is about a guy who free fell from the edge of space to Earth, which was just a wild adventure.
Everything's quite hard-hitting in your career. Do you never fancy Saturday night takeaway just for a bit of time off?
Do you know, that's exactly what my mum says.
Is it?
Yeah. No, it's funny, isn't it? I found myself coming back round quite often to programmes that are quite hard-hitting, that can be quite dark sometimes as well. But what you're trying to do is make it something that people can watch, and that feels like it's got some light in it, and that it's not just traumatic for them. So, but you're right. I think quite often you find yourself ending up in places that feel quite dark, and it can sometimes be about the worst that people do, but which can also create an effect in people that's about the best that people can do, like the worst of crime, but the best of professionalism with the police, for example. And we quite often look at that equation like that.
Vicky, yourself, a brief history of your TV career?
So I started in journalism, started on BBC Radio Sheffield.
Did you?
Doing reports about the Harvest Festival and the like. But I realised quickly that I wasn't as interested in shorter form storytelling, but still wanted to work with real people, real stories, and things that sort of, they were what mattered to me. So I had a bit of a foray into entertainment very briefly, realised that television was quite hard work, and that I wanted to put that effort into making documentaries. So the most recent things I would say I've series produced are Ambulance on BBC One. I did a programme about drug smuggling. The young lady, Michaela McCollum, who was an Irish girl that tried to smuggle 12 kilograms of cocaine from Ibiza to Peru. What else have I done? I did the Charles Bronson Fit to be Free, looking at Charles Bronson's bid for parole. So I've always been quite interested in law, justice, and that kind of thing. I did law at university, so a lot of those projects really played into my interests and things that I feel matter, but working with brilliant people. So
You also worked on 48 Hours in Police Custody USA.
I did, yes.
I'm intrigued to compare law and order in the USA compared to over here.
Wow. Well, it's a very different style of policing, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a response to the levels of violence that you see over there. I mean, obviously the main difference is gun crime.
Mm-hmm.
So when I've worked with the police here, and I've worked with multiple forces, Manchester, London, Bedfordshire, here.
Yeah.
When there's a murder, it's quite a big deal. You know, it's a rarity rather. That when we were there,
Yeah.
One happened every other day. And it was a shooting, semi-automatic weapons, often quite young, black males involved with it, but then members of the community getting caught in the crossfire. We actually attended a mass shooting that happened right at the end of the run. And that really impacted us all quite significantly, and the police, because even though they're quite common across America, they were rare to that police force. So,
Right.
And I think, you know, when you have to respond to subjects that are armed in that manner, it alters the style in which you respond to it.
It's television is really interesting because, of course, you know, we're about to talk about Murder 24/7, which is why you've kindly come to HQ to talk to me. Television is interesting in the fact that, you know, a program like Murder 24/7, you're dealing with victims, you're dealing with families, you're dealing with death, you're dealing with investigations into some really graphic details. But as you are both very talented TV people, of course, in the back of your mind, you must always be thinking, that's going to be good television. Is that always there? Are you always striving to make something that you think will really hammer home with the audience?
Actually, I don't think when we're in the middle of filming, we're thinking, oh, that's going to make great television.
Okay.
What you'll find is that Vicky and the team, they're so embedded within the teams here that in actual fact, they're almost sort of seeing it through the eyes of the detectives or the members of staff that they're working with, rather than thinking, gosh, this is going to be amazing television. There are moments where, and sometimes you don't know what you're catching in the camera until it's been edited.
Yeah.
So of course we'll film dozens and dozens of hours, hundreds of hours of material in one investigation, and then we'll edit that down to a program that's an hour or an hour and a half long. And in the process of editing it, you're working out, okay, what were the most significant parts of this story? Where are the twists and turns in it? And it's not always clear when you're in the middle of it exactly what they are, because there are so many threads running at any one time. And so actually what you find is we're often just trying to keep up. We're often just trying to just stay on top of what's happening without necessarily thinking, my God, this is amazing television. Mm-hmm. And then the reality is that obviously there are a lot of crime shows on television.
Yeah.
You know, there's a big audience for it. There are a lot of crime podcasts. There are a lot of, you know, crime documentaries. There's a lot of crime dramas. But crime shows themselves are at their best when they feel like they're a lens onto something else. That you feel like there's another issue at stake, or there's a theme that you're exploring that takes it away from being just a crime procedural, but actually starts to say something about the world around us, like mental health, or poverty, or assisted dying, or whatever it might be, but it feels like it's a lens onto something else.
Why do you think programmes about the police are so popular?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think that audiences really like seeing dedicated, committed professionals doing a really good job in difficult circumstances. And I think when it comes to the police, that's often what you see when you're filming. You know, you get a lot of like true crimes things that are past tense true crimes, so like a retelling of a story that's already happened.
Yeah.
Like we all know those sorts of series. But when you're actually in watching things unfold in front of you, and you're watching people try and do a job in front of you, it's a completely different experience. And I think audiences really like Vicky was talking about ambulances there, the audience really likes to see those professionals showing empathy, you know, trying to do the best possible job. And what we see when we're working with the police here is exactly the same thing. a huge amount of empathy, huge amount of professionalism, people trying to do the best possible job in really trying circumstances. And then I think there's also, we can't get away from it, audience are also drawn sometimes to the extremes that you can see in the world. That can be extreme violence, it can be the extremes of experience. But if you just delivered an audience to that and nothing else, they would really struggle. You need to feel like there's some purpose in it all. You need to feel that there's some good in amongst all the bad that's out there as well. And I think that's why a series like Murder 24/7 really, really works, because you really are coming at it through the good first.
You never know when a crime is going to happen. So I'm going to be quite technical here. Have you had teams north of West Mercia and south just with a camera and a sound bar? I'm not sure if that's what you call it. Apologies, but have they just been ready to go to get that call to say, "Yep, something's happened"? How does it all work?
So we're quite a small team, which has its advantages and disadvantages. Small team because it helps us integrate properly and without being a nuisance and a big presence. Mm-hmm. But with the geographical area of West Mercia, that is quite challenging. So the team are very dedicated and we're all pretty much on call 24/7 because that's, you know that you've got to be ready to respond to calls coming in and deploy. Sometimes that's tactical. We've got a couple of people that are based down south. We were originally going to be based in the middle in Redditch, but all the cases came in at the beginning up north. So we ended up staying there quite a lot. So it's... we had people on call on a weekend as well, and actually the staff here have been incredible. So the on-duty SIOs give as much notice as they can. They've been great at that, which has meant we can respond quickly. We have made lots of lovely friends throughout the force as well, who gives a heads up as soon as they spot something, so we can get as much information as we can, decide where to deploy, and who to deploy to get the right stuff, because you can never cover everything. So for us, it's always a balancing of priorities. What can't we miss, or what could we maybe pick up again later, or what is crucial at this time to help the audience understand what's going on, I
think the audience don't ever really appreciate how much work goes into, something which is split down to hour and a half episodes of a police documentary like Murder 24/7. I mean, you must have hours upon hours and hours and hours of footage that has just been cut and never used. I mean, it must take so long to just get everything down, choose the right components to tell that story of each investigation. I mean, how much work actually goes into putting the final piece together?
Well, it does start from the beginning. You have to make editorial choices, and when you're embedded like this, you see narratives start emerging, and they often are the same narratives that the investigation is following, like lines of inquiry, things like that. But we just film as much as we can and get as much materials as we can, body worn, CCTV, photographs, everything like that. And it's sometimes not really until you get it all that together and the sort of result of, the culmination of everybody's efforts, and when it's been to trial, that there could be a few different ways to tell that story. But you've got to pick one. So, and that's not always clear cut, is it, Colin?
We end up filming lots of cases that will never actually make it to the final series. So you're often... something that might appear as one thing turns out to be something else. We ultimately can't tell a story if it ends in an acquittal, unless that person consents, which, as you can probably imagine, is quite unusual. So we will shoot hundreds and hundreds of hours of stuff that will never ever see the light of day as well. But that's just in the nature of the job that we do. And then, like Vicky's saying, there's the filming part of it, and if you imagine that a murder will take 6 to 9 months to reach trial, So we'll be filming through that period. The editing of an hour-long episode will take like 13, 14, 15 weeks. So you're looking at another 4 or 5 months or so to just edit it into a program that you could then watch. So before you know it, we've been here for 18 months, and the series will go out in June. We think the first block of the series will go out in June. So that'll be 2 years. That'll be 2 years from when we started filming.
You must become so invested with each investigation.
You really do. And you have often had contact with the victims or their families, so you really want them to get the right result, feel like they've got justice. But also, you spend day in and day out with the officers, and you want it to go well for them as well, because they're so invested. It's you do get very close to everybody involved in the investigation, so you can't help being mega invested yourself. And obviously, the team put so much effort and so many hours into covering it. There's always that feeling that we might never see the light of day. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of reasons why you are so invested, but yeah, you can't help it.
You are, of course. I mean, just like police officers are day in, day out. You are, exposed to so much graphic detail on an investigation. How do you deal with that personally?
Well, I think I've been doing this job quite a long time. So I think you learn your own coping mechanisms to deal with it. It's not for everybody. Just like policing or being a paramedic, you quickly learn whether you're able to expose yourself to those things and how that's going to affect you. But I think also we are a close-knit team. We do keep our eye on each other. That's really important, is to be aware of each other's welfare and being able to talk about it. If you feel like you're not coping with something well, or something's bothering you and it's not going away like it should do, I've found out I can keep it very factual and try not to engage with it too much on an emotional level. Mm-hmm. Where I find it extremely difficult is with families and victims. Anything graphic, crime scene pictures, things like that, I can put in a box. But I find when you can't help emotionally connecting with that side of things, and I find that the most difficult to deal with.
Quite often what you'll find with photographers or documentary makers is that the camera really helps to create a sort of detachment between what you're seeing and what you're filming. And the act of filming can allow you to deal with it in a way that where the camera not there, it can be much harder to deal with. Yeah. And as long as you feel you're doing something that is purposeful, that has value, then you feel okay about witnessing those things or doing the job that you're doing. I think sometimes where people really struggle is when they feel like what they're doing is pointless. And all that's happening is that they're witnessing other people's trauma, or they're seeing things that are really graphic and upsetting, but they're not sure why. And they're not sure what to do about that. And I think if you don't feel you've got a purpose, that can be really, really difficult. One of the shows I mentioned earlier was a show about soldiers in Afghanistan. And it was all made up of GoPro footage shot by these young guys themselves. And they were fine. They could deal with what they were seeing when they felt like they had a job to do. When they got back and started to question why they were there in the first place, or whether they should have been there in the first place, it started to get really hard for them. Yeah. And I remember when I was watching the footage shot by these young guys, I was fine watching graphic footage. I could deal with that. What I really struggled with was the sound. I found the sound of the humanity when you're hearing people when an ID has gone off or they've been shot, or it was often the sound of them reacting to that, the things they were saying, was the hardest thing to deal with rather than the actual images themselves.
Why do you think that is?
I think you can tell yourself when you're watching something or you're seeing something really graphic, you can almost try and detach yourself from the person and almost try and look at it like it's a rational, logical thing, not an emotional thing. The moment you hear a voice, you connect to the human being. It's what Vicky was saying.
Yeah.
As soon as you connect to the human being, then you start to feel something completely different, and you can't detach yourself from it any longer. And you can never predict when that's going to happen. It can often be the most unexpected things that are the things that can really get through to you. It can be, a phrase that someone uses. It can be the look in someone's face. It can be something that connects you to that person or speaks to something going on in your life that suddenly means that whatever the barriers are between you and that person, they just disappear, and you start to feel it in a way that is on the edge of trauma.
So just following on from what Colin was saying there, I think when you really are sometimes in a position where you don't know what you're doing there, it's very traumatic. I think something I learned about coping with trauma is that about bearing witness, that's what you're there to do, and that's the purpose of being there. And I suppose, in essence, that's what we're doing when we're making documentaries. We're bearing witness to events and the work of organisations that you wouldn't normally get to see. So you have to tell yourself that's why you're there, and that's why you're putting yourself through this and exposing yourself to these sort of things.
Potentially starts the beginning of June on television. How many parts are going to be for Murder 24/7?
Well, we don't actually know yet, because we're just trying to work out from the number of investigations that we've got exactly how many episodes they can become. Because we don't always know whether an investigation is going to be half an hour or an hour or 2 hours, and until you start to edit them, it's almost impossible to know. But also, the judicial process hasn't finished in a lot of the cases that we've been filming on.
Right, I see.
So until there's an outcome, we can't even know whether we're going to be able to tell the story or not. So we actually have to hold off until quite late in the day before committing too much more resource or time to potentially editing a story that we might never be able to tell, because the judicial outcome isn't what you might expect. So we actually literally don't know the answer to that yet.
I see. There's me, and I've got no experience in television whatsoever. I just thought it'd all be in the can, ready to go. You had the frock ready, the suit ready, the red carpet was ready.
We've got the frock and suit ready. We just don't have the programs ready. You simply don't know. We're in the same way as when you're members of staff here. They won't know when the job's not over until it's completely over, and whatever the judicial process is going to be is done. We also, until that moment, don't know until we can tell whether we can tell the story or not.
Now, of course, Murder 24/7. You've worked with other forces for previous series. I wasn't going to say, why is West Mercia your favourite? That would have been far too cheesy. But I just wondered, how has West Mercia differed from others, if at all?
So the only force that we've filmed with on the previous series is Essex.
Okay.
And I suppose what's different, obviously the West Mercia patch is quite different to Essex in the sense it's much bigger. In lots of ways it's a harder area to cover north and south because the distances are big. Essex, I suspect it's probably got a higher rate of serious crime than West Mercia does. But actually, when you spend time in the police force, when you see the range of cases that are coming in, the range of cases is pretty well the same. So you find that the sort of diversity of crime that's being dealt with is pretty much the same. I'd definitely say that West Mercia is my favourite force. Don't tell Essex. No, I honestly, I think what's interesting actually is a lot of the police that you meet in Essex will have spent time in the Met. There's a kind of There's a scale to things there as well, where a lot of people have spent time in the Met. There are strong connections between Essex and London. And I think when you come here, there's probably a closer connection between the police that you meet and the community they serve, which feels like a really positive thing.
No, absolutely. They were the right words. Thanks for reading that script. That's really good. Just one more question for both of you. Do you think you could have been a police officer?
Can I answer on behalf of Vicky? She could have been a police officer. She absolutely could have been a police officer. I couldn't be a police officer. Definitely not.
I must say, I absolutely love it.
Do you?
I don't know if they'd take me on, but I've been saying to Mark Bellamy, if any spaces on the team, I just find it fascinating. And I used to do investigative journalism, and I just enjoy investigating things. But in the same breath, I think the police, especially in the current climate, have got such an incredibly difficult job with all the various pressures that are put onto them. I think it'd be a really difficult job, but I think it'd be a really good one.
Thank you both very much.
Pleasure.
Blues and Views. The West Mercia Police Podcast.